At 43, I had the kind of life people in Austin like to call earned. I owned a growing craft barbecue chain that started with one smoke-stained pit and a folding table behind a gas station, and now had 3 locations, a 4th on the way, and investors finally treated me like I belonged in the room. Most mornings started before sunrise. I liked it that way. I liked the quiet hiss of the smokers waking up, the first bite of oak smoke in the air, the feeling that something solid was already moving before the city had its coffee. By the time I got home at night, my house felt like proof that all those long years had meant something. Melissa would usually be in the kitchen, one hand on a wine glass, the other flipping through school emails or invoices. Noah was 15 and permanently half-buried in basketball highlights on his phone. Chloe was 11, sharper than most adults I knew, always asking questions that made you think twice before answering. We were loud in the comfortable way families get loud when nobody is afraid of the next sentence. For a long time, I thought that meant we were safe. Melissa had been with me before the money got clean and predictable. She saw the version of me that smelled like grease and mesquite 6 days a week and still came home too tired to speak. When the first restaurant finally turned a real profit, I put her name on the expansion documents without hesitation. It felt natural. We had built it together. I handled the food, the numbers, the staff. She handled branding, vendor relationships, the polished side of the business I never cared much for. She could walk into a room of bankers and make our smoked brisket sound like a luxury product instead of the result of me standing over fire for 14 hours. Everything looked steady from the outside, better than steady. The kind of life people quietly envy. That was why the changes felt so easy to dismiss at first. Melissa started staying out later, but we were expanding, so late nights made sense. She bought new clothes, but we had more public events, investor dinners, photo shoots. She got quieter at home, distracted in conversations, but stress can do that. I told myself all of it had an explanation because I needed it to. Still, little things began to catch in my mind. She started taking calls on the back patio instead of in the kitchen. She turned her phone face down without thinking. Once, when I touched her shoulder while she was texting, she flinched hard enough to spill her drink. She smiled right after and told me I'd scared her. I smiled back like I believed her. But that night, lying awake beside her, listening to the sough from the ceiling fan and the distant traffic outside, I stared at the dark and felt something cold move through me for the first time. Not fear, just a quiet sense that a life can look complete long after the cracks have already started. The first sign was how suddenly Melissa started treating ordinary days like they were auditions. She used to dress well when she had a reason, an opening, a tasting, an investor lunch. It was practical, clean, controlled. Then, somewhere in late spring, it shifted. New heels started appearing by the front door in pale boxes. Dresses with tags still hanging from the sleeves disappeared into the closet. She changed perfumes twice in 1 month. Not softer scents either. Sharper ones. Expensive ones that stayed in a room after she left it. I noticed because she had never cared that much before. One Tuesday morning, I came downstairs at 6:15 and found her already dressed for the day in a fitted cream blouse and dark skirt, hair pinned back, makeup done like she was heading to a magazine shoot instead of supplier meeting. The kitchen smelled like coffee and toasted sourdough. She was standing at the counter, typing fast with one hand, smiling at her phone. "Big day?" I asked. She locked the screen so quickly it looked rehearsed. "Just try not to drown," she said, and smiled at me over her shoulder. I kissed her cheek. Her body stayed still beneath my hand. That should have meant more to me than it did. After that, the phone became part of her. It used to live on tables, couch cushions, kitchen counters. Now it moved with her from room to room, like a second pulse. Bathroom, laundry room, patio, bedside table, screen down. If a message came in, she checked it. If I reached for her phone to move it, even casually, she'd say, "I've got," too fast, too light. Then came the arguments. Not big ones. That would have been easier. These were thin, unnecessary fights that started over nothing and ended with her acting like I had missed something obvious. I'd ask if she could make Noah's game on Friday, and she'd snap that I treated her like staff. I'd mention a catering invoice, and she'd accuse me of questioning her work. Once, over takeout containers left on the island, she stared at me with this flat, exhausted expression and said, "Do you ever get tired of controlling every room you walk into?" I remember the exact time because the microwave clock behind her said 9:41. I also remember saying nothing for a few seconds too long. The truth was, I didn't notice the inconsistencies, the late texts, the new routines, the way she'd leave the room to answer certain calls, then come back with a face too calm to be natural. I noticed all of it. I just kept filing it under pressure, growth, stress, expansion, because the business was growing fast, because investors were circling, because people get strange when money gets bigger. That was the excuse I kept feeding myself. At night, she lay beside me close enough to touch, but somehow farther away than she'd ever been. And each time I felt that distance, I told myself the same thing: don't make a problem where there isn't one. I didn't know yet that the real problem had already learned how to live in my house unnoticed. I wasn't supposed to be at the restaurant that afternoon. The flagship location ran smoothly without me by then. That was the whole point of building systems, so I didn't have to stand over every fire anymore. Thursdays were usually reserved for meetings across town, investor calls, expansion logistics. But one of the vendors canceled last minute, and for the first time in weeks, my schedule opened up, so I drove back. It was just after 2:30 p.m. The lunch rush had already burned out, leaving behind that familiar mix of quiet and leftover heat. The air still smelled like brisket fat and pepper crust, heavy and comfortable. Staff moved slower, cleaning, resetting, laughing in low voices near the prep stations. Normal. I nodded to a few of them, kept walking, and headed toward the back hallway that led to my office. The door was closed. That was the first thing. I never closed it during operating hours. I slowed down without thinking, not stopping, just enough to notice. There were voices inside, low, controlled, not arguing, not casual either. Something in between. Melissa's voice and a man's. I didn't knock. I don't know why. Maybe instinct. Maybe something deeper that had already started putting pieces together before my mind caught up. I stood just to the side of the door, out of view, close enough to hear clearly. "We can't keep delaying this," the man said. Calm, confident, the kind of voice that was used to being listened to. Melissa exhaled softly. "I know. I'm handling it." "Handling it how?" he asked. Not aggressive, just precise. There was a pause. I could hear the faint shift of fabric, like someone leaning against a desk. "I'm getting there," she said. "Ethan, trust me. The structure isn't complicated. It just needs adjustment." My hand tightened slightly against the wall. The man let out a quiet breath that almost sounded like amusement. Adjustment doesn't happen without pressure. Another pause. Then Melissa's voice dropped, softer now. I said I'd take care of it. Something moved inside the room. A chair maybe, or footsteps. Then his voice again, closer this time. "And you always do." There was a silence after that. Not empty. The kind of silence that says more than words. I didn't need to see it. I could hear it in the space between them. The shift, the familiarity, the absence of distance. My chest felt steady. Not tight, not panicked, just very still. Like everything inside me had slowed down to a controlled, deliberate pace. I leaned slightly, just enough to catch a sliver through the narrow gap where the door hadn't fully latched. Melissa was standing near my desk, close to him, too close. He was well-dressed, tailored suit, clean lines, the kind of man who didn't walk into places like this without purpose. One hand rested lightly on the edge of my desk. The other brushed along her arm like it belonged there. She didn't move away. That was the moment, not the touch, not the words, the fact that she didn't move. I stepped back silently, my shoes barely making a sound against the polished concrete floor. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. There was no rush of anger, no sudden explosion waiting to happen. Just clarity. Cold, clean, immediate. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This was something built over time. Something planned. Something tied not just to her, but to my business, my work, my life. I walked back down the hallway the same way I came in, passing staff who had no idea anything had changed. But everything had, and for the first time since those small, strange changes began, I stopped explaining them away. I didn't go back into that office. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask questions. I didn't give her the chance to lie. By the time I got into my truck, the decision was already made. Not emotionally, logically. I drove 3 blocks away, parked under a faded oak tree behind a closed auto shop, and just sat there with the engine off. The world outside kept moving. Cars passing. Someone walking a dog, the low hum of the city. But inside the cab, everything felt sealed off. I replayed the conversation once. Not for pain, for details, adjustment, structure, pressure. This wasn't just an affair. It was business. That part settled deeper than anything else. Melissa cheating would have been enough. But Melissa positioning herself inside my company, using someone else, someone with money, to shift control, that changed the entire equation. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't touched in months. Daniel Reeves, corporate attorney. Quiet, precise. The kind of man who didn't waste words or lose cases. He picked up on the second ring. Ethan, I need to see you, I said. A brief pause. Today? Yes. Another pause. Shorter this time. 4:30. I'll be there. I hung up and sat still for another minute before starting the engine. No music on the drive. No calls. Just silence and the steady hum of tires against asphalt. By the time I walked into Daniel's office, I had already shifted into something else. Not husband, not partner, operator. He didn't ask small questions. Just gestured for me to sit. What's happening? I told him everything. Not with emotion. Just facts. Timeline. Behavior changes. What I heard. What I saw. The man in the office. Daniel listened without interrupting. Fingers steepled in front of him. Eyes steady. When I finished, he leaned back slightly. Do you know who he is? Investor, I said, or pretending to be one. Daniel nodded once. And your wife? My partner on paper. Branding. Vendor relations. Some operational authority. Another small nod. Then he said something that locked everything into place. She's already preparing. I didn't react outwardly. Explain. If she's talking about restructuring and pressure, he said calmly, that means conversations have already happened, likely with outside counsel or financial backing. You don't use language like that unless you're positioning for leverage. A quiet beat passed between us. Then he added, almost casually, most likely scenario? She's planning a divorce while trying to secure partial control or force a buyout of the business. There it was. Not suspicion. Confirmation. I felt it settle in my chest like weight finding its center. What do I do? I asked. Daniel's expression didn't change. You don't react, he said. You prepare better than she has. That was the moment the direction became clear. Not confrontation. Not emotion. Strategy. He reached for a legal pad and started writing. We need to look at ownership structure, voting rights, access to accounts, and any vulnerabilities she can exploit. Quietly. I nodded once. And Ethan, he added, looking up at me for the first time with something sharper in his eyes. From this moment on, you assume everything she does is intentional. I stood up a few minutes later with a list in my hand and something else in my mind. Clarity. When I got home that night, Melissa was already there, barefoot in the kitchen, wine glass in hand, soft music playing. She smiled at me like nothing had changed. Long day, she asked. I set my keys down, met her eyes, and gave her the same calm tone I always had. Yeah, I said, but productive. She nodded, satisfied. And just like that, we stood in the same house. Only now, we were playing 2 completely different games. I didn't rush it. For 3 days, I watched. Melissa moved through the house like she always did. Controlled, efficient, composed. If anything, she was more attentive than usual. Dinner on time. Questions about Noah's practice. Sitting with Chloe while she did homework. Brushing her hair back the same way she always had. It was almost perfect. Too perfect. That told me everything I needed to know. By the fourth night, I decided it was time, not for confrontation, for alignment. I waited until after dinner. The dishes were done. The house quiet except for the low hum of the dishwasher and the faint echo of a game playing somewhere on Noah's phone upstairs. "Hey," I called. "Can you both come down here for a minute?" Their footsteps came one after the other. Noah first, slow and slightly annoyed. Chloe right behind him, quicker, already sensing something in my voice. We sat in the living room. No TV, no distractions, just the three of us. Melissa was still in the kitchen. I didn't call her in. This conversation wasn't for her. I leaned forward slightly, resting my forearms on my knees. "There's something I need to tell you," I said. Noah straightened a little. Chloe's eyes stayed locked on me. "We're going to have some changes," I continued. Calm, even. "Not today, not tomorrow, but soon." No panic in my voice. No anger, just certainty. Noah frowned. "What kind of changes?" I held his gaze. "Your mom and I, we're not on the same path anymore." Silence. Chloe's fingers tightened slightly in the fabric of the couch. Noah looked toward the kitchen for half a second, then back at me. "Are you saying you're getting divorced?" "I'm saying things are going to be different," I replied, "and I need to make some decisions. But before I do, I want to give you both something most people don't get." They were both fully focused now. "A choice." That word landed heavier than anything else. Noah leaned back slightly. "A choice about what?" "When things change," I said, steady and controlled. "You can stay here with your mom, or you can come with me." Chloe spoke first. Quiet, but sharp. "Why would we need to choose?" I paused for just a second, because this was the line. "I'm not going to explain everything right now," I said, "but I will tell you this. Nothing that's happening is your fault. And whatever you decide, I won't hold against you." Noah looked down at his hands. Chloe didn't look away from me. Seconds passed. Then Chloe asked the question I knew was coming. "Did Mom do something?" I didn't answer directly. Instead, I said, "I'm going to do what's best for you. That's all you need to know right now." Another silence. Longer this time. Then Noah exhaled slowly, like he'd already been thinking about something before this conversation even started. "She's been weird," he muttered. Chloe nodded immediately. "Yeah." They exchanged a look. One of those quiet, unspoken conversations siblings have when they already know more than they've said out loud. Then Noah looked back at me. "If you leave," he said carefully, "you're not coming back, are you?" I met his eyes. No, that was the truth. Clean. Final. Chloe didn't hesitate. "I'm going with you." No doubt. No pause. Noah looked at her, then back at me. A few seconds. Then he nodded once. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Me too." There it was. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just a decision. And in that moment, I felt something settle into place deeper than anything else so far. Not revenge. Not anger. Control. From the kitchen, I could hear Melissa moving, glasses clinking softly, the faint sound of running water, still unaware, still playing her version of the story. I leaned back slowly, looking at both of them. "All right," I said, and just like that, the plan wasn't just mine anymore. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was overwhelmed, because there was too much to execute. By 5:10 a.m., I was already in my office, this time alone. Door closed, lights off except for the desk lamp, casting a tight circle over paperwork and my laptop. Outside, the first staff would arrive in under an hour. Inside, everything was already moving. Daniel had been clear. Speed mattered. Silence mattered more. I started with the accounts. Not draining them. Not doing anything reckless. Reallocating. Shifting operational funds into protected structures Melissa didn't have direct access to. Legal. Clean. Pre-approved the night before through emergency clauses I had never expected to use. Vendor payments rerouted. Expansion capital reassigned. Lines of credit adjusted. From the outside, nothing broke, but control moved, piece by piece. By 7:30, I was on a call with a man Melissa had never heard of. Terms are locked. I asked. "They are," he replied. Calm, neutral, silent partner. Old contact. Someone who understood discretion better than most people understood money. We moved today, I said. Wire hits within the hour. It did. Just like that, a percentage of the business, strategic, critical, was no longer where Melissa thought it was. Not gone, just unreachable. I ended the call and sat back for a moment, letting the quiet settle. Then I moved on. By midday, paperwork was signed. Digital trails were sealed behind layers she wouldn't be able to untangle quickly. Authority structures adjusted just enough to shift decision-making power away from where she expected it to sit. Not obvious, not yet, but permanent. That afternoon, I picked the kids up early. No explanation to the school beyond family reasons. Noah didn't ask questions. Chloe watched me the entire drive, reading everything I didn't say. We didn't go home. We went to the house once. Just once. Melissa wasn't there. That part was important. Take what matters, I told them. Not everything. Just what you won't replace. Noah grabbed clothes, his basketball, a pair of worn-out sneakers he refused to throw away. Chloe packed books, a small box of things from her room, and the necklace Melissa had given her years ago. She hesitated before putting it in her bag. But she did. I didn't take much. A duffel, documents, a few things that mattered. The rest stayed exactly where it was. Like nothing had happened. By 6:40 p.m., we were on the road. North. No music, just the steady rhythm of tires cutting through distance. Austin faded behind us without ceremony. No final look, no hesitation. Melissa called once. Her name lit up the screen. I let it ring. Then it stopped. She didn't call again. By the time night fully settled in, the city was gone. Lights replaced by darkness, noise replaced by open road. The kids slept somewhere past midnight, one on each side of the back seat. Quiet and still. I kept driving. Hours passed. State lines blurred. And somewhere in that long stretch of silence, I felt it clearly for the first time. Not loss. Not relief. Separation. Clean. Complete. By the time we reached a lake town in northern Michigan 2 days later, the air was colder, sharper. The kind that wakes you up the second you step outside. Small place. Quiet. Hidden in the kind of way people don't find unless they're looking. Exactly what I needed. Exactly what you wouldn't expect. I turned off the engine in front of a modest lakeside grill with a faded wooden sign and a dock stretching out into still water. Noah stirred in the back. Chloe blinked awake. "Where are we?" she asked softly. I looked out at the lake for a second before answering. "Somewhere new," I said. And just like that, we were gone. The first morning felt unreal. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet one. No traffic. No phones buzzing. No schedule stacked with meetings and decisions waiting to be made. Just the sound of water moving against the dock and wind pushing lightly through the trees. I woke up before the kids, out of habit, and stepped outside. The air was cold enough to cut through the last of Texas. Still clinging to me. The lake stretched out flat and gray under the early light, untouched, like nothing here had ever been rushed. For the first time in years, there was nothing demanding my attention, and that felt unfamiliar. The grill sat about 30 feet from the small house we were staying in. Weathered wood, metal counters, a smoker that had seen better days but was still standing. The sign above it hung slightly crooked. The paint faded from years of sun. I ran my hand along the edge of the counter. Solid, simple, honest. A voice behind me broke the silence. "Still checking things like they're going to disappear?" I turned. Mark leaned against the doorway. Coffee in hand, same as he'd done 20 years ago in a college apartment that smelled like cheap beer and bad decisions. He hadn't changed much. Older, sure. Slower maybe, but steady. I like knowing what I'm working with, I said. He nodded once, like he expected that answer. "They'll come around," he added, glancing toward the house. "Kids adjust faster than we do." I didn't respond right away, because I wasn't sure if that was true. Around 8:15, Noah stepped outside first. Hoodie, hands in his pockets. Still half asleep, but already scanning everything like he needed to understand it. "This is it," he asked. "For now," I said. He nodded slowly. Chloe came out a few minutes later, wrapped in a blanket, hair messy, eyes sharper than either of ours. She walked straight past me, down toward the water, and just stood there, looking, taking it in. No complaints. No questions. That told me more than anything she could have said. The first week moved differently. No structure at first, just adjustment. We opened the grill in a limited way. Simple menu, small hours, burgers, smoked chicken, basic sides. Nothing complicated, just enough to get things moving. Noah started helping without being asked, cleaning tables, watching how things worked, asking questions when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Chloe stayed closer at first, reading, sitting near the counter, quiet, but she watched everything, every customer, every interaction, every shift in tone. At night, we ate together in a way we hadn't in years. No distractions, no rushed conversations between obligations, just food, quiet, and the kind of stillness that lets things settle whether you want them to or not. Melissa didn't call again. No messages, no attempts. That didn't mean she wasn't doing anything. It meant she was. Back in Austin, things were moving too. I knew that, and soon enough, she was going to realize exactly what I had taken with me and what I hadn't left behind. It took 12 days. That's how long it took for Melissa to realize something was wrong. Not emotionally, structurally. The first sign came through a mistransfer, a routine vendor payment, one she had approved dozens of times before, didn't go through. At first, she assumed it was a banking delay. Then another payment failed. Then a third. By the end of the second day, she was making calls. By the third, she was getting answers she didn't understand. Access restricted. Authorization required. Ownership verification pending. Words that shouldn't have applied to her, but did. I wasn't there to see it, but I could picture it clearly. Her standing in the office, the same one I had walked away from. Phone in hand, voice type but controlled, trying to reassert authority that no longer responded to her. And somewhere in that process, she would have reached out to him, the investor, the man in the suit, the one who thought he had leverage. That was when things started breaking faster, because he wasn't invested in her. He was invested in control. And the moment control slipped, he disappeared. No return calls, no meetings, no reassurances, just silence, the kind that leaves someone exposed in a room they thought they owned. Within days, contracts started slipping. One supplier pulled back after a review of updated terms. Another delayed shipments indefinitely. A third requested renegotiation under conditions that made no sense, unless you understood that confidence in leadership had already started to erode. Melissa wasn't just losing control. She was losing credibility. And in business, that spreads faster than anything else. Staff noticed. Managers started asking questions she couldn't answer cleanly. Decisions that used to be automatic now stalled. Systems she thought she understood stopped responding the way they used to, because they weren't hers anymore. Not really. By the end of the second week, the pressure wasn't quiet anymore. It was visible. Financial gaps, operational delays, unreturned emails, and no Ethan to stabilize any of it. That was the part she hadn't prepared for. Not the money, not the structure, the absence, because I hadn't fought her. I hadn't argued. I hadn't tried to stop her. I had simply removed myself. And everything that made the system work. Somewhere in that chaos, she finally tried to reach me again. A call. Late. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. I watched the screen light up on the small table beside the bed. Then it stopped. No voicemail. No message. Just that same silence she had been left with. Outside, the lake was still. Inside, everything was steady. And hundreds of miles away, her world was coming apart piece by piece, with nothing left to hold it together. She found me faster than I expected, not through instinct, through pressure. When money starts disappearing, when contracts collapse, when control slips through your hands, people stop guessing and start digging. Lawyers get involved. Investigators follow trails. Patterns get pulled apart, and eventually, they lead somewhere. 3 weeks after we arrived, a white envelope showed up at the grill. No return address. Just my name. Mark handed it to me without a word. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. I opened at the counter. The smell of smoke and grease still hanging in the air. Legal documents. Filed in Texas. Melissa wasn't asking anymore. She was accusing. Financial fraud. Asset concealment. Parental abduction. I read every line once, then folded it back neatly and set it down beside the register. No reaction. No urgency. Just confirmation. She had finally stopped trying to regain control, quietly. Now she wanted to force it. That same afternoon, I called Daniel. "I just got served," I said. "I assumed you would," he replied calmly. No surprise in his voice. "Send me everything." "I will." A brief pause. Then he added, "She's overreaching." "I know. And that's good for us." That word again. Us. Because this wasn't just my situation anymore. It was a case. And cases had outcomes. Over the next few weeks, everything shifted into a different kind of structure. Not business. Not family. War, but quiet. Precise. Controlled. Melissa's filings were aggressive. Broad accusations. Designed to create pressure. To force me into reacting fast, sloppy, emotional. I did none of that. Every response went through Daniel. Every document was measured. Every timeline supported. Bank transfers, legal. Ownership shifts, documented. Partnership agreements, binding. There were no gaps. Because I hadn't acted out of panic. I had acted early. That difference mattered now. But then something unexpected surfaced. Not from Melissa, from the man, the investor. Daniel called me late one evening. "I've been looking into him," he said. "Your wife's partner." I leaned against the counter, watching the lake through the window. "And he's not just an investor." A pause. "He's been involved in multiple businesses that show the same pattern. Rapid entry, structural influence, then collapse or extraction of value." I didn't speak. "Ethan," Daniel continued, voice sharper now, "it looks like he was positioning your company for something much bigger than just an affair." There it was, the missing piece. This wasn't just personal betrayal. It was strategic. Melissa hadn't just made a bad decision. She had been used. Carefully, slowly. And now, she was alone in it. As the case moved forward, that truth started surfacing in filings, in records, in connections she couldn't explain. Her arguments weakened. Her position shifted from aggressive to defensive because the story she was trying to tell didn't hold under weight. Weeks turned into months. Hearings scheduled, evidence submitted, pressure building. And through all of it, I stayed exactly the same. Calm, measured, unmoved, because this wasn't about proving she was wrong. It was about letting the truth stand long enough for everyone else to see it. The courtroom was quieter than I expected. Not silent, just controlled. The kind of silence where every word matters more than it should. Melissa sat across from me, perfectly put together, neutral colors, minimal jewelry, the version of her design to look stable, reasonable, wronged. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed it too. Her attorney spoke first. Confident, structured. He painted a clean story. A husband who vanished. A father who took his children across state lines. Financial movements framed as manipulation. On paper, it almost worked. Then Daniel stood. No raised voice. No theatrics. Just facts. Timelines. Documents. Every transfer explained. Every decision supported. Every accusation answered before it could settle. Piece by piece, the narrative shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough. Then came the part that mattered. The kids. I didn't look at Melissa when Noah walked up. I watched him instead. He stood straight. Hand steady. Voice controlled in that way that told me he had thought through every word before saying it. "No one forced us to go," he said. "We chose." Simple. Clear. Unmovable. Chloe followed. She didn't look at the attorneys. Didn't look at the judge. She looked straight ahead. "Things at home didn't feel right anymore," she said quietly. "Dad didn't tell us everything, but he didn't have to." There was no anger in her voice. That made it heavier. Then Daniel introduced the final layer. The investor, records, patterns, other companies, other collapses, the same structure, the same outcome. Melissa's involvement wasn't framed as evil. It was framed as compromised, manipulated, but still responsible, because she chose to stay in it. That distinction mattered. By the time the judge spoke, the room had already settled on the outcome. Primary custody, granted to me. Financial accusations, dismissed. Further investigation, recommended into the investor's activities. It ended the same way everything else had. Not loud. Final. Outside the courthouse, Melissa called my name. I stopped, turned. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. Structurally. I didn't think it would go like this, she said. I studied her for a second. That was the first honest thing she had said in a long time. I know, I replied. She swallowed. Was any of it real? The question hung there. Heavy. Late. I didn't answer immediately, because the truth wasn't simple. Then I gave her the only answer that mattered. It was, I said, until it wasn't. I turned and walked away. No anger. No satisfaction. Just closure. Years passed quietly after that. The grill grew into something steady. Not massive. Not fast. But real. Noah found his direction. Chloe found hers. And me, I stopped building for scale. I started building for stability. Sometimes, late at night, standing by the water, I'd think about everything that happened. Not with regret. Not even with bitterness. Just understanding. Because in the end, nothing I did destroyed her life. She made her choices. I made mine. The difference was simple. She believed she was in control. I made sure I actually was. And when the truth finally stood on its own, it didn't need me to defend it.